And a big turning point for me as far as all of that was I had an audition. And in the audition, it was for Usher, and he was in the room. And it was like, wow, this was like a dream come true. It was just me auditioning, me, the choreographer, and Usher. And I don't think I've ever told this story like publicly before. So you're like, you're hearing this for the first time. This is a very right. This is a very personal story. It's very personal. Yeah. So I'm in the room and Usher's sitting there and he's like, what song do you want me to play? All he wanted was to watch me dance and freestyle. And as a dancer, you know, for a freestyle dancer, that's your dream. That's all you want, is to be able to just be yourself, right?
Welcome to episode 3 of the Enculturation podcast, where we aim to make learning about the world fun, engaging, and accessible, helping you stay tuned, stay curious. So today, I welcome Kai Martinez. She is a professional choreographer, animation consultant, and dancer from New York. Currently based in Los Angeles, California, her background as a freestyle movement artist and a commercial choreography dancer gives her a unique voice as a creator. With a dance career that spans almost 2 decades, Kai has performed globally with some of the world's biggest superstars. Her performance credits include Christina Aguilera, Justin Timberlake, Kendrick Lamar, Paul McCartney, Camila Cabello, Omarion, Beck, and many more. The knowledge she has gained as a performer, Kai began expanding her reach within the entertainment industry. She has worked as a commercial actor for such brands as McDonald's, McAfee, AT&T, Walmart, H&R Block, Hard Rock Cafe, 19 Crimes, SK2, Shoe Carnival, Boost Mobile, and many more. Kai has also worked as a movement coach and choreographer for Grammy Award-winning artists Anderson .Paak and Coco Sarai. All this experience combined led her to hold a very unique role in Disney's 60th animated film Encanto, where she not only danced and acted, but also she worked as an animation reference consultant alongside choreographer Jamal Sims to help create the musical dance number for the film. She also worked closely to the animation team to help bring the dance sequences to life, advising on movement as well as cultural nuances derived from her own Colombian heritage. Welcome, Kai.
What's up, Ben? Thank you for having me. That was a great welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. You're episode number 3, so this is a very special episode. You've also are the guest that's traveled the longest distance to be here, so I'm very honored, very grateful, very appreciative that you're here. You got a great story to tell, and I hope I can do justice in shining your journey.
Oh, thank you. Absolutely. And, I just want to say thank you for having me. Thank you for reaching out. And this experience, because we could have done it virtually, as you suggested, we could have done it virtually. But for me, there was something important about coming here and physically bringing myself here. And we spoke about it briefly in conversation about the act of stepping out of my comfort zone, or our comfort zone, period. And the act of driving up here from LA, which is about 5 hours or so, which was a super fun road trip. But even that act of stepping out of our comfort zone to then grow, I think that has pushed me in a very nice way. So even before sitting here at this table, I'm already excited and I'm like, let's do it. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, the pleasure is all mine. So with that said, let's start from the top. I'm sure you had like an amazing origin story. So what's your origin story?
Ah, man. Well, I am first generation born Colombian-American. I was born in Jackson Heights, Queens, New York. What's up? Jackson Heights is a very well-known Colombian-centric neighborhood. So I grew up very much immersed in the Colombian culture and Latin culture and in the home. I speak Spanish and, all of my family are immigrated from Colombia. But outside my home, I was very much hip hop. It was very much, I went to high school in Brooklyn. I went to St. John's University in Jamaica, Queens. I grew up in a time where MTV was playing music videos, and I was very highly influenced by Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, Missy Elliott, even NSYNC and Britney Spears, and just so much different variety of music and culture and dance. All of that highly influenced me, on top of my Latin culture of influence of music and dance. So all of that coupled in together was just like the perfect storm for me to grow up in this space of music and dance and after school programming. I didn't come up in a dance studio, but I was just immersed in the arts. My family really cultivated that as children. They allowed us to stay in after school activities and do the school plays and all that. So I grew up doing that, and it wasn't until after college that I decided to make a career out of this, which was a very interesting conversation to have with my parents, because I studied, right? I studied media communication arts, which is like marketing, advertising, PR, and that was not dance. So after college, and I graduated cum laude, shout out to St. John's University. And having that conversation with my parents as far as I wanted to now be a professional dancer was very difficult, and they didn't quite understand it at first. But they supported, and that allowed me to kind of enter the industry. And now it's been over 15 years that I've been around. And from New York, I got an agent, and I started training in Broadway Dance Center and Perry Dance Steps on Broadway, if you guys are familiar with those dance studios. And then I also came up as a freestyle dancer. So I started studying under some of the OGs, on the dance community, on the freestyle dance tip. So I studied under like a Brian Green and Link and who am I thinking about? I'm running out of their names. Sekou. So we have Brian Green, Sekou, Link, Buddhist Stretch, and at the time, Princess Lakaru was teaching whacking. Benny Ninja was teaching voguing. Then I learned under Danielle Polanco. And just, it was such a great space to train. New York City is such a great space to train, as you know.
Yeah, I've heard the saying that if you can survive New York, you can survive anywhere.
Anywhere. Yeah. So growing up in that was, again, I think it prepared me to be a professional anything. Like, especially an artist, because we were taught early on to be undeniable and that the work speaks for itself, So we were coming into the dance industry, I was very like raw, and we were very just passionate, and we just wanted to learn and grow. It wasn't about being, having the greatest headshots or having the dopest look. We didn't even care about that stuff. We just wanted to be good,
I can relate to you on the headshot thing. Like for some years, I didn't have a good headshot, right? And this is a funny story. I'll never forget it. But since you brought it up, there was one occasion where I think her name was Bridget. She was the former manager at Culture Shock, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was teaching a workshop there, like a special pop-up one outside of like a regular class,
Yeah.
And then I had no headshot, or rather I didn't send one over in time.
Uh-huh.
So they went on my Facebook and got one of me camping, like covered in dirt. And I was like, well, at least I know people aren't here for my headshots.
Right. That's so funny. Yeah, because, it's, you just don't think about it like that, And, but once I came out to LA, and now it'll be about 9 years ago that I came out to LA, it was like, whoa. You do learn. LA taught me a lot of like the structure and the business side of dance, even whether it's commercial or freestyle underground scene. I think it taught me to polish myself and to like make myself marketable and presentable in a way that accurately represented who I was as an artist. And it's made all the difference. And the opportunities that have been available to me out here have just been amazing. So yeah, it's been a long road since Jackson Heights, but I'm so glad that that we're here now.
What brought you to LA from New York? The reason why I asked is LA is like almost complete opposite of New York in some ways, for better and for worse.
Yeah.
So what personally appealed about LA to you?
Well, I'll say for me, it felt like LA was the hub of entertainment. New York it's a lot going on over there, but to be honest, the cost of living is it's very expensive for an artist to survive. And I'll say again, I didn't come up in a dance studio, so I don't have like technical training like that, like ballet and jazz and stuff. So the opportunities for me to work were not as abundant as they are here. So what brought me to LA was that. And then, it was a lot of my friends coming out here and doing the jobs I wanted to do. They were dancing for the Rihanna. They were dancing for Beyonce. They were dancing for Missy Elliott. And I just I felt like I was kind of reached a point in New York where it just wasn't growing as much like that, and I wanted to challenge myself and be like, yo, because you think New York, I feel like trains you to be able to make it anywhere. But LA is kind of like where everyone comes from all around the world to make it. So I feel like once you come to LA, you have an edge if you're from New York, or if you've trained in New York, or if you lived in New York. You understand how to hustle and grind, but LA is kind of where you come to do it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Definitely shout out to New York. My first time in New York, it's one of the few places where I felt that dance here isn't a train thing; it's a life thing, it's a breath thing.
Yeah.
There's something about going to I don't know if you ever went to the Fort Greene parties over there.
Yeah,
where it's like the whole community, everybody, every color, every age group, every type of orientation is just there, and it's like it's really different, like being in that type of space and growing up in that type of space versus like, okay, let me go on YouTube, or let me go on to a class. I mean, those are good too, because you got to make do what you got, right? But New York is definitely a special place in that regard.
Right. I'm sure you've been to Funk Box, correct?
Yeah.
So, and I think for any, especially, I'll group them and say street styles, even though I don't like to say that. But like whacker, house, hip hop, any dancer from that genre, to go to a place like Funk Box, where you can literally see in front of your face these OGs getting down, and like it's a masterclass, and it's like in real time. Like it's not in a studio, it's not in a class. You're watching people in a party break it down right in front of your face. And it was legendary. And I remember going there and sitting in the corner and just watching like Tony McGregor and Ejo and Link, and then just watching them go round for round in the cypher. And I'll never forget, I remember once Link, who was one of my mentors, he invited me into the cypher. He was like, hey, come on in. And I was like, no, I'm okay. And afterwards, I remember him telling me like, hey, when people invite you into the cypher, it's for you to exchange. So for you to refuse to go in the cypher, it's like you're almost refusing to exchange, as opposed to, and you're just like taking as opposed to giving and receiving. You know what I mean? Like give energy into the cypher to everyone else as they give to you.
Yeah.
That was one.
For our listeners who are not as familiar with the dance scene, I think it's really common to think when it comes to dance, there's only battles, right? So what Kai is talking about is more like a conversation, exchanging meanings. We're having a conversation through movement. So it's listening and also communicating, and not just battles. There's definitely other things to dance besides battles, and what she's referring to is like a deeper aspect.
Yeah, and that's even something I had to learn. I had to learn the culture of exchanging within the cypher, and it's deeper than what you said, like a battle. Like I don't always want to take someone's head off. Then granted, that's sometimes that is the nature, like a friendly battle, or sometimes it gets intense. But this idea of, you're exchanging energy, and you're also kind of, what better way to get to know someone than to get to know how they move? So I think even wherever I go, if there's a dance event now, or since then, for many years now, I go in and I watch when people present themselves in a cypher. It's like their introduction to who they are as humans. And it's so nice to see like, oh, wow, this is a part of you. So I feel like I know them even without knowing their name.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I honestly, some may call me biased, but I'm honest about my biases, right? I do think dance is one of the art forms that's very honest, maybe like the most honest art form as far as physical expressions, because you can't really fake it. You
can't.
Like, trust me, everyone's tried at some point, and it shows.
It shows. And it's funny. That's what I tell my students, and that's what I had to be real with myself about too. And I only teach that because I've had to go through that journey myself, and I've been taught that. Also, another thing that Link said to me many years ago was, if you don't believe in your dance, how do you expect anyone else to? You know what I mean? Like, if you don't like your own dance, how do you expect anyone else to like your movement?
Yeah. So great points. I want to get into that, and I want to backtrack a little bit. Mm-hmm. You mentioned you had an interesting conversation with your family about pursuing dance. I think that's worth unpacking, because I think it's a common challenge in people who come from families that maybe don't understand the arts as well, Yeah. So like, how did you navigate that? Was there like an aha moment, or was it just perseverance?
Oh man, it's funny because you look back on it now, and now my parents are my biggest supporters, and they're like super excited. And but in the beginning, it wasn't like that, and it's no fault of their own. My family, again, they're immigrants from another country. My dad came here when he was 27. He didn't know the language, and he faced a lot of hardship because of that, and he had to work hard. He had to do the quintessential American dream, right? So he worked in a hospital up until he retired, overnight, overtime, like doing many hours and all the things. So this idea of you work hard, get a life, get a family, retire, have a home, that was their idea of success.
So like pretty much survival, right?
Survival. And so for our generation, like my brother and I, they were like, you guys were born here, so you already have an advantage. And then they were like, well, we're going to put you through college so that now you don't have to do the jobs we did. You don't have to take a job at a hospital. You can be a doctor. You can be an engineer. You can be a lawyer. So we had those, and we knew the language, and we're technically American. But so after going through college, to then sit my parents down and say, this is not what calls to me, what calls to my heart, right, is to be an artist. They were like, what? You don't have a heart. What do you mean? You have to do this. And I remember specifically my dad saying, you have to get a job. Like, you have to work hard and find, and
Is that implied that anything artistic or dance was not viewed as a job?
Yes.
Ding, ding, ding.
Ding, ding, ding. That was a perception. And for me, I've always been this passionate, emotional person. And I had been working since I was 15. Like I had office jobs in the summertime, and I was working all types of jobs because I wanted to. My parents instilled hard work in me early on. And I remember my last year of college, I had a marketing internship at Sony Music. So I was getting set up to have a good career in marketing and all that. And I hated it. I'm not gonna lie. Shout out to Sony Music, but man, it was the idea of waking up every day. I felt like a hamster. I wake up every day at the same time. I get to work at the same time. I go grab my coffee. Then I wait to see what I'm going to eat for lunch. And then I go into the meeting. And then I'm after lunch. What am I going to... Whoa. It felt like my life force was being sucked out.
Did it ever get to a point where you couldn't tell one day from the next?
Yes. Yes. And then like Monday, I'm depressed because I'm like, man, I just had this whole weekend. It was so great. And then for the whole week, I'm looking forward to Friday because then we get those 2 days to like be free. And then we have to go back into our cubicle and back into the grind,
Yeah, by be free, does that imply that on the weekends you were dancing more? Or
yeah, okay. Or just like being able to have autonomy over my life. I think that was it too. Mm-hmm. It was like being able to say, I'm not going to wake up at 7 a.m. I'm going to And so I yearned for that. And when my friends invited me to, my friends in my dance crew at the time, they were taking acting classes and stuff. I just started finding that passion. So no, at first they were not, my parents were not really on board with it. I think they didn't understand it. And even my brother too. It took him many years to understand what it meant. I think my family, outside of even my immediate family, they were all like, what is she doing with her life? I remember in the beginning, just like any internship or anything like that, I had to do a lot of free stuff. Right. So I'm like performing
Exposure.
Exposure. I had to get paid. I was cooking with exposure. And so I had to do a lot of like carnival pieces. If you don't know what carnival is, it's like a showcase, performer showcase.
In LA, right?
In LA. And they have one in New York as well.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of these like little dance shows that were choreographers would kind of put on, and I would just try to be out. I would take class. I was doing work study at the dance studios. I was just grinding. And I remember my parents they would joke anytime I had a performance. They'd be like, oh, another free one? Okay. And the little aside comments that people make. And, but that kind of fueled me. Because I was like, man, I just knew that if I made dance my plan A and my plan B was to make sure plan A worked, I just knew in my heart that like I could do it. I don't even, now that I think back, I'm like, why didn't I give up? Because there was many times where I could have like given up and I didn't. And I think it was just that belief. I just really had that belief in A, and B, the feeling that I got from dance and from being, anytime I was in class, anytime I had a breakthrough. Because when you grow as a dancer, you're like, I just learned how to do this move. It's just like a euphoric feeling. And so I kept kind of chasing that feeling. And then I had like a checklist, like, okay, I want to take everyone's class and I want to be able to get good in taking these classes. And I want to learn these dance styles. And then I want to get these headshots. And then I want to get an agent. So as I kept checking the things off the list, my confidence grew. And then the work started coming. Because I believe, as we said, you can't fake the dance, the emotion. So as I grew more confident and more assertive in who I was, that showed in my dance. And so when I would go to an audition, I would stand out. I thought it was because my dance was getting better. No, there was an essence about what I was doing, how I walked into a room that was doing the work for me. And as the years progressed, my family now with Encanto, it was like, oh my gosh, wow, she did it. She's really doing it, but that journey for them was very interesting because I think they didn't understand it, but they still loved me enough to support me. Okay. And I think that's very important too, because a lot of times people don't understand it and then they'll try to like block you from doing what you want to do.
Like shame you into doing it, right?
Yeah. Or they'll make you feel bad or they won't support you, Me becoming a professional dancer meant I needed to live with my parents for a bit, because I couldn't afford to move out on my own and be a professional dancer. So them allowing me to stay with them was huge. That was like enough. That's all I needed. Like, you guys can think whatever you want. Like, you can make your jokes and about like, are you getting paid? Do all that. But the support that they showed me by just allowing me to even stay in the house with them, which they didn't have to, like I was maybe 21. They didn't have to. So that alone was huge. That was huge for me.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks for sharing that story. So now to the link part, right? You mentioned he was saying something about if you don't like yourself or your dance, who will, So what does that mean to you? And like, what does your dance mean to you? What's your why in dance? And how did you come to gain that confidence?
Man, yeah, that's been also a lifelong journey. I think my dance journey is such a parallel with my life's journey.
Yeah, one of my previous teachers, Brian Green, he mentioned that you can dance for 10 years and just barely find yourself, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really lifelong.
Yeah, and you know, I've been dancing forever, but it wasn't until I heard that correlation that it excuse me, that it started to make sense. And even then, even now, there's still layers that I'm peeling back. But for me, finding myself, especially once I moved out to LA, I think for me, moving to LA, away from my parents, away from my family, forced me to grow up as a human, as a person, as a woman, you know, even finding my sensuality. And I didn't come up as a very feminine girl. I was more tomboy. So that was also reflected in my dance. But now
Was that was that common in New York to be more tomboyish, or like was it something unique to you, or was it something because you grew up in New York?
No, I think a lot of the women in New York, a lot of the girls in New York have an edge to them. There's a something, there's a don't mess with me, I'm gonna beat you up kind of energy. There's a roughness. And even the most feminine girls that I know from New York have a little like, I'll kill you.
Yeah.
Don't try me.
You know, for people who first visit New York, and I used to be this way too, they tend to think New Yorkers are, how do they say this, rude or
Right.
very direct, right?
Yeah.
But I've actually come to appreciate it because there's no mind games, there's no guessing how someone feels.
Right.
Like, so, but also it teaches you to be strong, to stand up for yourself, right?
Right. Yeah. Like, you know, I love that about New Yorkers. And it wasn't until I moved out that I came to appreciate it. Because again, New Yorkers, we don't beat around the bush. Like, be like, yeah, I like that. No, I don't like that. You know, we tell you straight up. And even if we don't like it, we'll still support you. Be like, yo, I don't like what you did, but I still fucks with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like as someone who's been in California for the majority of my adult life, it was a big shock for me because in California, there's this passive aggressiveness that's permeated throughout everybody, where you're saying something, but you're not really saying something, you know? And luckily, I learned to grow past it. But with that said, New York, I have a fond appreciation for how raw and real. A previous friend from New York, she said this quote to me that I'll never forget. She said, y'all in California, y'all got times for naps. We don't do that here.
Right. I know. And I've become a napper out here. Don't ask me how that happened. I don't know. But I love my naps now. But that's right. In New York, we're just moving and grooving the whole day. You get so much done. You have to take the train. You have to. I was in New York this past summer. And I'm lugging around bags with clothes and having to change in the bathroom and having to take meetings at Starbucks. And you just have to figure it out in New York. And it just teaches you, man. Again, it teaches you to like not take anything for granted, you know, whereas LA, you know, you have your car, it's sunny. In New York, it rained on me one day. I didn't have an umbrella. I haven't had an umbrella in years. So I'm walking in New York, all of a sudden the buckets of rain just fall on me. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to walk in this rain. Like it felt good, but I appreciated all the little things, the little luxuries that we do have. You know what I mean? So definitely New York has that edge. So even as a dancer, I had that edge, and I had to learn how to let that be a reflection of who I am and find myself. So find the different aspects of who I am as a person and fall in love with that, even the not so cool parts of me, you know? And a big turning point for me as far as all of that was I had an audition. And in the audition, it was for Usher, and he was in the room. And it was like, wow, this was like a dream come true. It was just me auditioning, me, the choreographer, and Usher. And I don't think I've ever told this story like publicly before. So you're like, you're hearing this for the first time. This is a very right. This is a very personal story. It's very personal. Yeah. So I'm in the room, and Usher's sitting there, and he's like, "What song do you want me to play?" All he wanted was to watch me dance and freestyle. And as a dancer, you know, for a freestyle dancer, that's your dream. That's all you want, is to be able to just be yourself, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I froze. I said, "Oh, Michael Jackson." I think he played. I don't even remember what song he played. I was so not grounded in who I am, but I had been training. I had been doing all this training and freestyle and this and that sessions, and which is great. But I wasn't grounded in myself, so I just went and I just did moves. As we know as dancers, I was just doing moves to a beat. But there was no soul attached to it. I can't even remember how I felt during it, except for the fact that I was like, oh my God. And then I was, they were like, oh yeah, rehearsals are next week. So in my mind, I'm like, yeah, cool. I'm going to dance for Usher. No, definitely did not get called back. And it hurt. It hurt because all they asked me to do was to be myself. And I knew I didn't know myself. And I knew I did not give myself that opportunity. I couldn't blame it on anybody except for me in that moment. And that was a huge turning point for me because from that moment on, I swore to myself. I promised myself that I would never allow that to happen to me again. And so I was in every freestyle situation I could be in. I was in classes. I was in all type. I did a program called Motivating Excellence. I was immersed myself in myself so much that forced me to kind of find myself from there. So, sometimes you got to lose. You got to take the L to really understand what you need. And that was a huge turning point for me because after that, like I said, I started to understand who I was more. And then I started to become a little bit more particular in even the jobs that I would go for and what type of dance I would do.
So would it be fair to say that you found or took more ownership of yourself after overcoming your failures?
Yeah. I had to. Again, it was, especially not once I was in LA, it was like, yo, if I don't make it out here, there's no other option. I have to make it. So
what kept you what helped you recover from that kind of incident? Because was it traumatic for a while? Because you're dancing one-on-one pretty much with a celebrity or a star.
Yeah.
Were you starstruck? Did it introduce toxic thoughts into your head and you had to fight it? Like, how did you get past that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I cried. I think it was like my dream, was within grasp. It was like right here. It was right there. And I touched it. I literally touched him. I touched Usher. And at the time, that was one of my biggest, that was like the biggest opportunity that I had for a major star that was influential in my childhood, in my upbringing. And here I was, I go back to like this girl from like Queens who didn't come up in a dance studio and all that. Here I have this opportunity to dance with this artist. Wow. And then it just went away. And again, I didn't have anyone else to blame but myself. A lot of times we're like, oh, I wasn't tall enough, or oh, the choreographer picked their friend. We try to like justify why things happen. And thankfully, I've always been very like aware of like, no, this was me. Like I did something here that I can't blame anyone else for. So yeah, it was such a heartbreaking moment. And then to go on and see the show that I had auditioned for and then the tour and all that kind of happened. It was like, it stung. It stung a lot because it was bigger than just a job. It was an opportunity and also an opportunity to validate who I was in front of my family and say, hey guys, I'm doing something of value. Like I'm doing something over here. So all of that, it was bigger. It was bigger and it was heartbreaking.
I love your story. Thanks for sharing it. It's very humanizing because I think it's very easy to be on the outside, whether it's like seeing someone on TV or reading about somebody and assume that their successes were given to them or their successes came easy or this person has never encountered a failure. But I often find the true champions are the ones who constantly walk into failure but are able to also walk out of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man, absolutely. And I tell this to anyone who's willing to listen, especially about being an artist or being a dancer. Dance is one of the most heartbreaking career paths At least for me, it has been heartbreaking and hard, and it will turn its back on you. It will do all the things. It will lift you up, and then you think you're doing the job, and then you get chopped last minute. Chopped meaning you're taken off the job. But you keep coming back to it, because there's also when that feeling, and I'll go back to that feeling of feeling autonomy, or feeling freedom, of feeling that the way I'm creating, the way I'm moving is a direct connection to the music, and you just feel like you're in control of yourself, and that feeling of that dance gives you is what, at least for me, is what kept me coming back. Even after I had knee surgery, I tore my ACL and meniscus in 2016, and I was like, well, my dance career is done. I'm going to go to acting now. I'm going to be an actor, and I'm going to stay around the arts still.
Yeah, I think an injury is every dancer's worst nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard. Like, I sympathize with anyone that I know that has an injury, because it is one of the most difficult things financially, mentally, emotionally, physically that you will go through, Also, I say mentally, emotionally, because I identified as a dancer, right? So as who I was and how I walked into a room, my confidence was directly linked to my ability to dance. And that went away when I got injured. So I almost was like, I remember going to a party limping, and I'm watching everyone get down, and I'm like, wow, I really can't. I just have to stand here with the rest of us, with the rest of the people, and just watch. And it really makes you think about those things. But the good part about that for me was that it made me think of myself as deeper than just a dancer. So I had to ask myself, if I'm not a dancer, who am I? What is it about dance that keeps me coming back, or that interests me in the first place? And what I came to was, I love to tell a story. And dance is just one of the mediums that I have chosen to do that. And I love to feel, and I love to tell that emotional story, even if it's a freestyle choreography, whatever the case is. I love to create a vibe and an energy that people can feel. And I like to move people. And once I kind of got tapped into that, it also changed the way I danced when I came back to dancing. It changed the way I create. It changed the way I view my own art as not just a couple of steps. It's like, okay, well, what am I doing? What story am I telling here? And also being in alignment with that also attracted other jobs that are in alignment with that too. And so I find myself now in a space where it's like, wow, I really am getting paid to tell stories through dance. That's
wow,
interesting.
That's amazing. The commonality or the similarity I hear between both stories is there was something that got taken away, whether it's like the ability to dance or the opportunity to dance with Usher or another celebrity, right? It got taken away, but in the process of getting taken away, you reach even deeper, you reach even harder, and you found something new in that space.
Yeah. And I now looking back on it, I'm grateful for that. I'm not sure where I got it, but I'm grateful for that ability to kind of look deeper, because I think and this probably comes from my parents. My parents were never the type to give up. And they were always just like pushing through, like, okay, what's next? And they instilled that in my brother and I. And when we have faced difficult times, it has forced us to look deeper and like, okay, where can we find the solution in this? Or what needs to change in order for a different outcome to come out? And being able to do that has helped. And so now that I'm in a different space as a choreographer and even as a teacher, I believe it's my responsibility to help people do that for themselves. You know what I mean?
Wow. Did you ever explore any other physical art forms? And if you did, what was different about it that keeps you keep going with dance?
Physical art forms, meaning, well, I did
Like sports, for example,
Yeah, I've always been very physically active. I used to love playing soccer when I was a kid, and basketball, baseball. I have an older brother, so again, I told you I was a little tomboy growing up, so I was always playing sports. And I also played the saxophone when I was in middle school. And I was also I also a painter, and I drew a lot. Like I loved. It started when I was like in elementary school. I used to, we used to like trace stuff, and you used to put the image there and put the paper over it and trace. So I was doing that, and then I saw a boy in my class. He was able to draw it without tracing. And everyone was like, "That's so cool!" And in my head, I was like, "That looks kind of cool. I think I want to try it." And so I started just like with like Bugs Bunny, and I would like look at Bugs Bunny and then try to draw it. And it was this feeling of overcoming that I think kept me excited about it. And I always, even as I got older in school, I was always doing art programs as well, and drawing art classes and stuff. So honestly, I feel like if I didn't become a dancer, I would have probably been like an animator or like a painter. I loved anime. I loved like drawing Marvel superheroes. So I loved it. I just didn't know if that was something I could really do as a career. So that and dance, I didn't know if I could do these things. I just knew I loved to do them.
Yeah, I think part of the challenges of being an artist is, well, maybe there's more out there and I'm just ignorant of it, right? But it seems like part of the challenge is not knowing how to turn this art form or this passion into something that can be a career or be sustainable for the long term, right?
Right.
And I think sometimes it takes lots of attempts, and on the outside, it can be perceived as, oh yeah, you feel out this thing, right? But it's actually not the case. It's actually just exploration,
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll remind anyone who's listening, I came up in a time where there weren't dance competition shows. There were not. You didn't see professional dancers in the forefront. There was no social media, so there was no access to seeing dancers do their job professionally outside of a dance studio or music videos. Like you would see them on stage with the artist, or you would see them in music videos, but that was it. And so I would just see them. You didn't even know like who they were. You just knew they were dancing with Michael Jackson, So we didn't have that exposure to see that. And even in other art forms outside of maybe musicians and singers, I didn't grow up. Maybe that I'm just being ignorant to it as well, but I just was not exposed to that. So it did take a lot of trial and error. It did take a lot of, I don't know. I like this dance thing, but I'm gonna go over here and be a journalist. It's like what I thought I could make money from, or what I thought, my career path could be, which is honestly, it's cool now that I think kids are exposed to like social media and stuff, because they can see so many different types of jobs and career paths that they can take. And then now they can either make their own decision or find a new path.
Wow. So you just dropped a lot of information there. It's a lot to unpack. Let me think about it. I'm thinking about it. Did you ever go over any cruise? Were you part of any cruise, whether in New York or over here?
Yeah, actually, I was part of a flexing crew from Canarsie. It was Canarsie? Yeah, I think it's Canarsie. Yeah, from Canarsie, a flexing crew. Their name is Too Nice. And that was the only crew I really claimed. And I was a part of the CSA dance crew in St. John's University. But Too Nice was the only crew that I claimed because it was more than just, we more than danced together, but we were friends. We're still friends to this day. And we danced, but we went to school together. We traveled together. We got on each other's nerves. They're like my brothers, So once I once we grew older and we stopped dancing together, we were still friends. So joining any other crew for me felt a little bit like, no, I already have a crew. So
I've heard of flexing before, and usually when I hear that word or that term, that style, is used in conjunction with turfing, right? Well, I don't really know firsthand what flexing is. Can you explain a little bit what that is?
Well, turfing, I believe, is from the Bay.
Yeah, I'm not familiar.
Oakland?
It's just I hear those two styles. It's usually together.
Yeah, because they're similar in I'd say the way the aesthetic of it, but I believe the music and the culture of it are different. Flexing is originated in Brooklyn, New York. There was a TV show called Flex in Brooklyn, and it comes from a style called the bruck up. There was a gentleman. It's more of the music of it is very particular to like dance hall, and then it evolved into like a style of music that they dance to. And there was a dancer by the name of Bruck Up, and he used to like kind of do like these like arm like isolation, but like kind of like pops, but not really. You know what I mean? And so he kind of would just like do these very interesting movements, and the style developed from there, but it's from Brooklyn, New York. Turfing, don't quote me, but I believe it's from the West Coast. But what's similar is that they both have things that they both glide. So both styles have gliding in them, and so like I said, aesthetically they look similar.
Would you consider, or do you know of Storyboard P?
Yeah.
Would he be a flexor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He was probably an originator of the style, someone who's been around for a long time. And then he kind of took his style and evolved it into what he called, I believe, mutating or something like that. But yeah, his original style was flexing. And there's a battle in New York, in Brooklyn, called Battle Fest. And we used to watch it on YouTube. And they would have it was very, I think, ahead of its time. Shout out to Battlefest. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. Because I remember watching, and so back then, Storyboard P, his name was Professor, and I remember watching him come in like a surgeon outfit, and he was like just doing all these really cool movements, and he was like, it was very theatrical. So it's these theatrical battles of like gliding and tutting, and then they would isolate and do all this like real, just amazing movements. Then that evolved into like bone breaking. I don't know if you're familiar with a couple bone breakers.
I've heard the term, but I did not go deep into that style. Yeah,
so that shout out to Slick, shout out to Hobby, also shout out to Soup, who's another flexor. They're out in LA, and I believe Nugget, he's out in LA too. They've kind of kept the style going and put it into the commercial industry. So again, a style that originated in like Brooklyn and parties and in culturally very limited, kind of like has grown all over the world. And there's people performing it and teaching it and doing all types of things with it. So, but it originated, like I said, back then. And the show, it was a local show on like public access TV in Brooklyn. And my crew was on that show, and they would have like crews battling, and it was called Flex in Brooklyn. So from there, I joined in later on because I grew up in Queens. So by the time I went to St. John's, I connected with them, and I got introduced to this style too. And I was like, whoa, this is amazing. So it really, and for me, when I watched it, I was like, oh, they're like gliding, like Michael Jackson. I looked at it like that, like, oh, because I loved Michael, and they're like tutting, and I'm like, oh yeah, like remember the time, And so for me, it appealed to me like that because I grew up really loving the style of Michael Jackson, which, again, if you really think about it, there's a lot of popping influence there. There's, Poppin' Pete and Electric Boogaloo's and all them. They influenced Michael's movement. So indirectly, I was being influenced by the same, the same dance principles that we know now.
Yeah, I remember when first starting out with dance, I would say that if there's any dance styles that give the wow feeling, it's probably the illusionary styles, right?
Yeah.
Because it just looks. I don't want to say inhuman, but it just looks like my mind is bending just watching this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. So culturally, as far as what happens inside the culture, so an example, in the house scene, it's big on exchanges, right? And other scenes might be bigger on battles, right? So what's the scene like inside the flexing culture?
Man, it's pretty battle heavy. It's pretty battle heavy. I remember my experience with it was like, you go in and you violate, like you just kill it. You know what I mean? You go in there, and if anyone's coming for you, like there's an exchange there, but it's not necessarily like an aggressive bad exchange, but it's like I'm gonna show you who I am, and I'm probably gonna be better than you, and I'm gonna come for your head, So, and those are really fun because they force you, that competitive edge forces you to be innovative and forces you to if you get beat, to go practice and come back even harder. You know what I mean? I think that also is reflective of the New York culture, where it's like, yo, how you present yourself is how people are going to treat you. So what you wear, how you dress, how you look. I have friends that used to match their drinks to their outfits. Like, fashion in New York is so intense, and we take it so seriously. So as a dancer now, you're like, yo, I'm a glide in these fresh Jordans, and they're not gonna have a scuff on them, and watch, or foam posits, which is a sneaker that a lot of flex dancers like to use for the gliding because it has a stiff sole. But yeah, and so for me, being around those dancers like really helped me also kind of gain like a little chip on my shoulder. Like, yeah, I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna come do my thing. So
yeah, how's the sportsmanship like? Meaning, is the beef prolonged, or is it only in the battles?
It depends.
Okay.
It depends, and I think I would compare it a bit to like the breaking scene, right? It depends. It can get a little intense in some of these more competitive dance cultures. You go in there and it can, or you might have like a long-standing beef with somebody, and it's like, every time I see this person, we got a battle. So it's very interesting culture to kind of get involved in. But I would say I don't like to like get lost in it. I wouldn't say, because you can get lost in it.
Yeah. With that said, nice segue. So let's exit that rabbit hole and re-enter your rabbit hole, right? So, what are some fun facts and achievements you've had over the years?
Oh man, fun facts and achievements.
And if it's long list, we got all the time.
Right. Right. You just cut me down later. Fun facts. Fun fact, I speak Italian. Io parlo un po' di italiano. Fun fact.
Does someone else in your family speak Italian, or how do you speak?
Well, I studied it in school.
Oh, okay.
And I just really enjoyed it. And I wanted to study something outside of Spanish. So that was fun. I actually went to Italy and had a great time over there. I think the people in Italy are so fly. Like, young and old. Everyone's always dressed nice and their hair's done. And it's just so cool.
Have you ever been to Argentina? Because I haven't been there, but I've heard that in Argentina there's Italian Spanish.
Yeah, they do. They have a heavy Italian influence. I haven't been there, but I've heard that even growing up, you just knew that Argentine Spanish was a little different. It's always a little different. So, yeah. And there's some parts in Colombia too that have a little bit of a different Spanish, very similar to Italy as well.
Yeah, I had no idea there was such a big Italian population in Argentina, because apparently they have really bomb pizzas down there.
They do?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. You just taught me something.
Yeah. I learned it from Katya, so no surprise there. Yeah.
Shout out to Katya. Yo, y'all, you didn't even have Katya on the show. Katya is the most interesting person I think I've met in a really long time. Yeah, you got to get into her.
Yeah,
she's great.
She's definitely my opener. She's she is a co-host, so whenever she wants to come on, the door is always open for her.
Oh, nice. Yeah, she's great. Shout out to Katya.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's talk about Encanto. Which is a whole topic in itself. Let's start with how you got the gig, because you got the gig during the pandemic, which is interesting in itself because the pandemic was hard or challenging for a lot of artists, right? But that silver lining came through,
Yeah, and it came right at a time where, at the end of 2020, I was kind of getting into the space of like, man, how long is this pandemic gonna be, and what can I do? Like, what am I doing? What can I spent most of 2020. When the pandemic hit, I was on tour. I was on tour with Omarion, and it was like, 2 weeks. And then the pandemic hit, and the 2 weeks became 2 years. And so right around the time towards Thanksgiving of 2020, I was actually visiting my family. Sorry, I was visiting my family in Georgia, and I didn't know what was coming next. And I got a call from Jamal Sims, who's the head choreographer on the film, and he told me, he was like, hey, so Disney's doing this film based on Colombia, and it's based on a family who lives in Colombia. Would you want to be a part of it? And I was like, yes. It's like, I don't care about nothing else. Do I have to go now? Like, what's happening? So I told him, and I will mention, he had been asking around for someone who knew Colombia, who was Colombian, a dancer. And shout out to Carlos.
Is he a choreographer or?
He's a dancer and he's a videographer now.
Okay.
Shout out to my friend Carlos. He's from Venezuela, and he actually put my name. He reminded Jamal, who I've worked with in the past. He reminded me, Jamal, that I was Colombian and kind of put in a good word for me. So this quote when they say like your friends put your name in spaces where you're in rooms you're not even in, or like something like that. It's like when people say your name in rooms you're not even in to give you an opportunity. Like that was a huge.
Yeah, I remember there's this quote that it's not who knows you, it's who knows what you can do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's such a gem, and it's so real because it wasn't about just me being Colombian. And I spoke to Carlos about this, and he's like, I know you're a professional. I know you've been around for a long time. And that was so nice to hear because that is a big part of how I carry myself as a professional, like being on time, having integrity as an artist, being just a nice person, having a good energy about yourself when you walk in a room, whatever you have going on in your personal life, leaving that at the door, and just being a professional. That goes beyond your talent, at least in my eyes. So for that to be a big reason why I got this job was like everything for me. Because if you know Jamal Sims, he's all about energy and he's all about good energy. He is a great person, great energy himself. So he wants to be around people like that. And so that's how I got the assistant choreographer position. And I was also a dancer. And then after we finished the first number, which was We Don't Talk About Bruno, then the production asked if I would be interested in being an animation consultant. I didn't know what that was. But I said yes, because why not? I'm going to say yes to everything. So I said yes, and then they brought me in to work with the animation team and help them get all the cultural nuances right of the film and the animation. It was very interesting to get the anatomy of it right. Meaning, and this was a discovery I made from animation, they see the characters as we see dance. So they see animation as we see dance. They're obsessive about the human body and about the shifting of the shoulders and the rotation of the hips and the weight transfers on the ball of the foot, all of that. They're very detail oriented about. So once I discovered that, it was easy to talk to them and communicate, because now like they'll know, like if I said her leg is too turned out, they know what that means, you know? So that was like a match made in heaven. I had such a great time. We worked for about 9 months on the film.
Did you guys ever do what do you call that again?
Motion capture?
Yes.
No.
Wow.
We didn't.
That's incredible.
Yeah, we didn't. And that's another testament to the work we did on the animation side. Because so we came in on the choreography side. We were in a dance studio. We had the music. We created to the music. We would show that to the directors. They would give us notes, etc., etc. When we're done, we give those videos. They would record us in several different angles, with skirts, without skirts on, all different types of things. They would send that to the animation team. And now the animation team literally was just, and that's why they're called reference videos, because they would watch these videos and duplicate the movement on now the characters. So the way they have the characters set up is like on the computer, like little buttons move everything. Like one moves the eyebrow and the other moves. It's so intense. But it's so beautiful when the way they do it. So shout out to anyone who does animation, because it's such a tedious job. I remember hearing for them to make like 3 seconds of film, it's like a week. So I remember when I would come in with notes at first, they would look at me like, really? It's offbeat, huh? Okay. You know, I could tell they were like, oh no, this means more work. But they did it, and we worked really well together. And I think when going in and really detailing on the dance movements, I know it made a huge difference, because that is something that really stands out about the film, is how specific the movements are and how culturally relevant they are and how authentic they look. It was a lot of the work that we did.
Yeah, you know, like I went to watch the movie initially mostly to support you and check out what's happening, right?
Yeah.
I didn't expect to enjoy the movie as much as I did.
Yeah?
Yeah, I was like, you know, because I really just walked into it with no expectations. Oh yeah, Kai worked on this movie. Let's go check it out. That was as far as I looked into it, you know?
Yeah.
And then when I actually watched it, I was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe Disney made this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's.
Well, what stood out for you? Like, what was it? What drew you in?
So many things, to be honest. And we'll talk about it all here. So one of which is, I love like all the nuance in the body language.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like I was in that place, you know?
Yeah,
because I think body language is hard to communicate, and it's one of those things that really sets one culture from the next, right? Like Asians have a certain body language, Colombians have a certain body language, right?
Yeah,
and I felt that the body language was just like really on point. There's a certain and you know, I could be wrong, but it's just my perception, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like Latin American cultures, there's a certain like sass that's just in the culture that I don't see as much in other places, but it's definitely heavy there, you know? And it's one thing I love. And I saw the show after going to Mexico, even though Mexico isn't in Colombia, but there's still that flavor there, right? Yeah. So it felt like very authentic to what I experienced in Mexico. So that's on the body language side. On the story side, I love that it wasn't like, okay, there is a person or, you know, a princess that needs to be rescued. I like how real the story is. It's arguably a kid's movie, but the themes are lifelong themes, right?
Right.
Like coming from a place that's going through conflict, and you're seeking opportunity. That's how I view those gifts. It's like an opportunity or a career choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's the abuela, or kind of like the matriarch, that's just wants so much, that has so much to sacrifice for her family. But I don't want to like take over the conversation.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like to hear your reaction, because, you know, we sat with it for so long, and, you know, it was personal to me. Obviously, it's Colombian, and I it resonated so well with me.
Yeah.
But it was, what I love about the movie is that once it came out, we have people from different cultures, from different backgrounds, from different parts of the world that can relate to it. So I love that it educated people on Colombian culture in a very entertaining and positive light, but it also didn't isolate people. So it's not like you feel like, oh, this is only Colombians only. No, this was very much like, no, this is a story for all of us.
Yeah,
we can all relate to.
as a Vietnamese American or Asian American, I definitely related to 100%. The body language and like the food, the non-story part, the culture part might not be the same in Vietnamese culture, but the story is very relevant, right? And I think it's a great. I think it's a great immigrant story for sure.
Yeah.
You know, and there's so much spectrum to being an immigrant, right? And I think for a movie to be that successful from Disney that humanizes and shows the case, okay, you know, like there's lots of families out there that just want the best for their family, and this is what it can look like, you know?
Right. And I think that's also interesting too. And I remember the director saying that this was they chose to write this story as a question, like how well do we know our families? And I think in watching this film, you can relate to one of these characters, whether it's Luisa, the strong one, or the perfect one, or the clumsy one, Maribel. And then, you know, you look at the grandmother, the abuela's character, and I'm sure there's people in our family, especially our elders, that sometimes growing up, we didn't understand why they were so harsh or why they were so kind of hard on us or they're hard on our parents or whatever. And then you think about it, it's like, well, do we really know their story? Like, do we really know why they are the way they are? Like, have we taken the time out to try to understand their, you know, what it would be like for someone to immigrate to this country, leave everyone they know and everything they know to try and make it. And now they feel this immense pressure of having to make it. And now they have children to take care of and they have to make sure they're okay. So it really makes you think about all of these things. So
yeah, it's mind-boggling. You know, if you were to place me in another country and I didn't have a smartphone, I would be terrified and lost, right?
Right.
So to be in a generation that move across country, whichever country it is, and not know the language, and during a time when there was no internet or there was no smartphones, and you got to figure stuff out, it's like, how?
Right. We're like, wait, what? Who? There's no, where's the Wi-Fi password? No. What? So yeah, man, it's really, and I think that's the biggest draw of this film, that there's no clear villain, but there's this level and this idea of intergenerational trauma that we have to talk about.
You know, I don't normally do this, but I want to do a quick rant because one of my pet peeves, not about Encanto, but about movies nowadays that target kids.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how else to say this. Maybe 2023 even we'll find a better way. But I think there's a lot of kids movies now or shows now that are super dumb. You know, that's just straight up dumb. I don't know how else to put it. Where it shows kids making very selfish decisions, like Sweet Tooth on Netflix is one occasion. I watched that and I'm like, like literally they're in a life or death situation, and this kid is chasing after candy. I'm like, right, you know, and so that's one of my pet peeves. I think the last time I felt this strongly about an animation movie was probably watching Soul.
Yes, that was really nice.
Yeah. So for me, Encanto is on a similar level where the message is very deep and it's very intelligent, right? And it's so relatable to so many stories. And even like not as an immigrant, but just like the process of finding who you are, right? And versus who you want to be and who other people think you are. I think that was a very big theme in the show. Can you speak more about that? Yeah,
like thinking. Being who you think everyone else wants you to be, right? That's something I've also struggled with. You know, I've also, growing up, like I said, it was hard to tell my parents that I wanted to be an artist. It's hard to kind of tell them, you know, you think about Bruno's character, right? It's kind of misunderstood. And he's kind of the black sheep. And you think about, why is he the black sheep? He's really just misunderstood. And going through that journey, I think different people, whether, like I said, you're the strong one who takes on everyone's burden, but you don't really show your weakness or show your vulnerability, but you have it, you know, or the one that, like Isabella, I think I can relate to her in the sense of I always had good grades.
Mm-hmm.
I was always, you good?
Yeah.
Okay. I always had good grades, and I was always like the perfect daughter kind of. And so when I decided to be a dancer, it was kind of like, well, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? You know, that journey is very interesting, and it's very personal. I think we all go through it no matter what. So
Yeah. So there's a lot of interesting characters on the show or the movie. What about the characters do you relate to? Because there's Mirabelle, who's unsure of her own talent or potential,
yeah.
and still, compared to others, still finding her path, right?
Mhm.
And maybe even thinks that her path is, or maybe has problems with self-accepting because
Right.
she's yet to find her gifts. And there's Luisa, who is like the masculine but very sensitive at the same time. So that duality there. And Bruno, who's like, as you mentioned, misunderstood and outcasted, but still trying so hard for the family to be there, right?
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. I it's very interesting because outside of being a fan of the film, having worked on the film, I feel like I have a very personal connection to each of these characters physically because I had to physically embody them. So in that process, I gained an appreciation for each one of their internal struggles because of the way we had to portray them physically. So like Mirabelle was actually very challenging to work on because she's not well put together. She's quirky. And for a dancer, that's very challenging to not dance on beat, to not walk on beat, to stumble and not make it look graceful. You know, so I had a very interesting journey with her. Isabella, I felt really connected to her because I'm also a whacker, and I feel like her movements were very graceful, and it was a lot of fun to dive into her character. And Luisa kind of had that like more of a like this strong energy that I really enjoyed. And even Dolores had a very like quiet cat-like, characterization. So we had these physical characters that we had to give them, and I connected with them all, to be honest. I think there's a little bit of each one of them in us all. I specifically, like I said, with Bruno, this idea of being misunderstood really stood out to me, of feeling like you're kind of like the black sheep, or you're the one that people don't understand. And again, being an artist, I didn't quite feel understood by my family. I felt that they were looking at me, especially as I started getting older, like, all right, when is this phase gonna end? Or what is she doing? Or when is she gonna get married and have children? And is she not gonna get married and have children? And I'd have people in my family make comments like, well, you are getting older. Time doesn't wait for anyone. So I felt like, man, they just don't get it. But I'm doing it because I love it and I want them to be proud. I also wanted my family to be proud of me. And I love my family. So I really connected with Bruno in that way,
Yeah, Bruno is an interesting character because he had a gift, but also I don't think he fully understood his gift.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like there was potential to have a lot of good from it, but maybe he was like worried that these visions were going to lead to disaster,
Yeah. Because of the way people started putting that on him, projecting that on him. If you think about the song, which is the #1 song on Billboard and all that, the story of that song, and I really, I love that Lin-Manuel Miranda did such an incredible job with these songs and telling the story in these songs. But if you listen to that song, everyone's talking about all the bad omens that he did. And as the song progresses, you actually it starts to get a little ridiculous, right? And it starts to feel a little bit like, the game Telephone, how it'll start off with a message. By the end, it's like this whole different message. It almost felt like that. It felt like because he did something, let's say on Peppa and Felix's wedding day, when at the end he says, I just saw you were sweating. It wasn't even a prophecy. I just saw you were sweating. But since they started with that, that escalated to towards the end. It's like, oh, he said I would grow a belly and I did. No, that's ridiculous. You just kept eating, so it just becomes that kind of snowball effect. And I think a lot of people in their families can, once you get like that bad rap, pretty much, it's like, that's who you are. Oh, you're the person that does this. You're the person that is good for nothing, or you're the person that's always gossiping, and it's like, no, that's not who I am. That's just a perception of who you are, of who you think I am. But for me, it's like I can either take on that role or I can move past it. And I think with Bruno's character, he didn't want to move past it because he didn't want to hurt his family. So he instead decided to leave. That way he wouldn't hurt anyone else.
That's a great point. I think the intersection of self-love versus sacrifice for others is well represented in Bruno, right? Because he's sacrificing himself at the expense of self-love and moving forward, and all while doing it where no one's even like noticing these things. I think that's a crazy place. I definitely know of some people in my life that is a Bruno, for example, where they are so focused on sacrifice for the family or for another goal that it's just like this. I guess Bruno's perfectly made because he's living in a dark place, right? He's like, you're in a space where no one even knows that you're there.
Right, and it's like you're caught between making your family proud or preserving the peace in your family, or living your authentic self. And it's a hard decision to make for a lot of people. It's hard to say, I'm going to live my life authentically, whether that means you're of a different sexual orientation, whether that means you love people of a different race in some places that was a big deal, or whether it's I'm choosing a different career path, whatever is just not the norm in your family structure. To go against that, it takes a lot because, at least in the beginning or for some time, you're going to be met with conflict. So it's hard. It's a very hard thing to do. And and it's also okay to retreat. That's also a decision that gets made too. But you're retreating, like you said, you're sacrificing yourself for the well-being of others. But then we saw how Bruno even looked. Like he was all disheveled and like he looked all like, ugh, But so to see his transformation at the end of the film when he's like, no, this is who I am. And you're going to take it or leave it. And this is what happened. It's like, wow, he finally chose to choose himself and live authentically.
Yeah, I love that there wasn't necessarily a hero character. Everyone had qualities that made them human. So there are a lot of human characters and not necessarily hero characters, which I think is so important, right? Because, I thought about this recently where, don't get me wrong, I love Marvel movies. I love Doctor Strange. I love my superpowers. I love time travel. Right? I love all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I seriously think the true superheroes are humans who don't have these powers, and you got to figure this stuff out without like super strength or unlimited finance.
Right?
We got to figure all this stuff out. And I think that's amazing, right? Because it's hard. It's ambiguous. It's general. It's hard. And and I love how real all the characters were, because I can definitely see myself in each of the characters in some way, right? For sure.
Even like the abuela's character, like to imagine what it would be like to be a single, I think single parents are superheroes as well. I have a dog and it's hard to take care of the dog. You know what I mean? Like it's just hard to take care of anything outside of yourself. So then to take care of children and to bring up children on your own, and like you said, do it with financial obligations and work and sacrifice and all these things, man, the humanity aspect of it, I don't think gets highlighted enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like the older I get, the more weight I'm able to perceive with how much my family, in particular my mom, has endured for me to be in this seat right now.
Right?
Yeah, it's kind of mind blowing. So that story hits that spot for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that with my parents as well, I'm like, wow, My parents, like when they were my age that I am right now, and I don't have children, I'm not married, which is fine. But they already had my brother and I. They were already I'm like, wow, man, that's crazy. I'm over here trying to figure out what I'm going to eat tonight, So I have but you have to kind of go through life, and life kind of has to beat you up a bit for you to really kind of respect and understand, like, whoa, my parents they went through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to all the hardworking single or otherwise parents out there. You guys are doing a super job.
Right, y'all are getting it.
Let's see. Let's talk about the significance in food and music within Encanto and within Colombian culture. How important is it?
Oh man, it's everything. It's everything. It's central to. Well, the family is the center of our communities, right? Family dynamics. And then within the family, the center of it is food and music. You can always find Colombian people celebrating something with food and with music. There's always music playing. Even in my home now, like whenever I'm cleaning, there's always music playing. Whenever food is almost like a sign of, it's like a love language. And I didn't realize this until I started bringing my friends that are not Colombian or even Latino to meet my parents or even my family. And again, we'll all sit at a table and everyone they cook, whoever's hosting cooks, and they serve you a plate, and you didn't even ask for that plate. It's just there. It just appears in front of you. And whenever I would go to Colombia, I would go visit family, and the same thing. We would go visit, you thinking you're going for some coffee, and all of a sudden a big plate of rice and beans and chicken would just appear. And it's the way that we show our love for one another. And then to accept that is also a sign of love. To eat it, that's a big deal too. Because I remember I had some friends that were American, and they were like, oh no, it's okay, I'm not hungry. And I remember like my dad would look at someone like, what?
Is that considered offensive or rude?
Yeah.
Or not trustworthy? Or what?
Yeah, like it's like, wait, what? You're not going to eat? Again, because it's correlated to love. So like, I'm giving you something of myself, and now you must take it. Now you must receive it. And even growing up, like we were always told before we went to go visit anyone's house, you're like, you don't ask for food, but you take what you're given. You don't go in anyone's fridge. You just sit politely. You visit, and then when they offer you something, you take it. And that sounds weird now, but I mean food, like not offer like, anything bad. And that's how I was raised. And also, so now I'll even do it to my friends. Like if I'm eating something, it's difficult for me to eat something and you not eat. Like if I'm eating something, I'll be like, Vin, do you want some? And then something else comes up, I'll be like, do you want some of this? Do you want? And I have some American friends that are like, no, I'm good. I'm like, it's just part of the culture. It's the culture of the food is so central to what we do. And then add on music to that. Music is how we relate to one another. Dancing is huge. I remember I showed the Animators at Disney some of my family home videos of our parties and how we used to relate to one another. And what I noticed, even in watching those videos back, I noticed particularly my grandmother. She was always like a strong, all the women in the family are very strong. They're very strong. Like abuela, very strong, very, always well put together. You never saw them like make a mistake. And they were always just very serious. But it was something about when we would all gather in a party, you would see my grandmother laughing. And her sisters laughing and dancing. And you would see my dad and the guys in the family kind of invite them to dance and make jokes. And it was like their time to like let their hair down and to like kind of unwind. And I think that's very important for family, for the family structure to come together around music and food and drinks and let loose and relate to one another and dance together. And I also saw, myself as a child, as like 2 years old, with like my grandfather, and he's dancing with me, and he's like teaching me how to dance. And this was also stuff I didn't realize until I got asked these questions. The question one of the animators asked me was, how do you learn to dance? Like, how did you learn to dance salsa? How did you learn to dance cumbia? How do you learn that? And I was like, well, a lot of it is passed down culturally through our family at these parties. I remember I would used to dance as a kid on my dad's feet. I would put my feet on his, and he would move his feet, and I'm holding, I would hold his hand, and then he would pass me to my uncle. Then my uncle would dance with me. He would do a turn, and now I know how to do a turn. He would pass me to my brother. My brother would do another move, and like that, and we would rotate with each other, and that's how even the culture is passed down from generation to generation.
Yeah, I can't say that I've been around the world and well-traveled, but I do trust my instincts that there's something special about Latin America where that breath of life, it's so real. It's it's everywhere, And going back to New York, that's what New York reminds me of, is like people have this pulse, and there's a lineage or heritage there that's a generation thing, right? Not like, yeah.
Yeah, because even with dance in New York, like you going back to Funk Box, we're going to bring it full circle. Going back to Funk Box, me sitting there and watching, or us, because you've been there too, us sitting there and watching our older generations get down. We're learning. We're taking this in. And them inviting us into the cypher is them teaching us. They're, physically in real time, they're passing down the culture of what we do, so that when we get to their age, now we are going to pass that down to the younger generations. So all of that is all of that energy. And, again, I remember going down into Funk Box and Sullivan Room and seeing there was this lady who was always there. She always had incense burning, and you smell the incense, and you see the percussionists going and the DJs going and dancing. And that will always be in my memory. So as I continue to grow as an artist, I'm going to want to recreate that energy somewhere else and then pass that on to the younger generations. I think that's what's beautiful about music and dance and even food, just culture. It's for us to be able to learn it and grab it, and then we're able to pass it down. That's what lives on.
So for anyone, for any Colombian-Americans or non-Colombians out there, and they're like, oh yeah, I want to go to either Colombia or Latin America, what are some things etiquette-wise that they should be mindful of? Because, this is a different culture, there's a different mindset.
Yeah.
And so some things may be a little jarring, while some habits from, I guess, American life or the Western life may be unwelcome, right? So how can someone travel harmoniously in this area?
Well, I think what's beautiful about Colombian culture is that people are very welcoming. It has gotten a bad rap for many years because of like Pablo Escobar and narcos and all that. And while yes, that exists, I mean that does exist. They had a huge issue with guerrilla warfare for many years and kidnapping. There's violence everywhere. But the heart of Colombian people is rooted in tradition and family, in music and dance. And I think the best advice I can give to anyone that goes to visit is to open your heart to just have your heart open, and don't be afraid to receive love. Because that can be, I think for specifically like Americans, I would say, to be like hugged by a stranger, to be like dancing with someone, that's very like invasive, like physical, like whoa, I would just open myself to that. I think when you give yourself permission to be open, to take in someone else's culture, and to seek to understand why they are the way they are, then everything else falls into place. Because even if you make a mistake, or if you like say something, oh, I don't want to eat, or something like that, it's coming from an innocent place. I think removing the ego and stepping into a world and understanding that you're a visitor in this world, and being open to that. I think that's the best advice I can give.
Yeah, so I'm hearing about being open to receiving different kind of interactions from the locals that you may get from America or whatever country you're from, and coming with an open mind to learn about the culture, right? And,
Yes.
and being able to like maybe leave the assumptions at the door and see what you can walk away with.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, don't leaving your perception of the way you live your life back home.
What are some events, if there are any, that's particular to, that's a highlight to visit? Whether it's is there a food fest or a music fest in Colombia?
Oh my God. Yeah, there's stuff happening all the time in Colombia, and the different so Colombia, they call it the crossroads of South America because it's one of the most biologically diverse countries in the world. You know, you have everything from your tropical climates to Amazon, you have your Andes mountains, you have really high elevation, you have the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean in Colombia. So, and you have all types of people and food. So with all that being said, every area has their own, like in Medellin, it's really known for their flowers. So they have Festival of Flowers. There's an area called El Eje Cafetero, where they produce. So there's a lot of coffee farms there. So you want to visit that because then you'll get to see where the coffee's made and all these farms where they're grown. You know, you go to the Caribbean coast, you're gonna find they even have an EDM festival out there.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, they have an EDM festival for all my festy heads out there. I believe it's in January. And that there's a lot of African influence in that area, and they have preserved a lot of the old Spanish architecture, and so you can just go. It's very nostalgic and it's very historical, so you can learn a lot about there. And then Bogota is the capital. It's very much like New York, so you'll have they have like hip hop festivals out there, and they're very connected to also American culture. And I'm trying to think where else. Yeah, so every other town has their like smaller festivals that are unique to what maybe they produce in their town or what they produce in that area.
Winter for us is summer for them, right?
Not necessarily.
Oh,
it's actually pretty close to the equator because Ecuador obviously is where the equator lies.
Yeah.
So Colombia is more so depending on the region. Like Bogota is on the mountains. So it's always the same weather. They just have a raining season or a dry season. But it's always around like 60 degrees.
So it's like San Diego.
Yeah. It's always kind of there. Medellin, they call it the town of the eternal spring. It's always springtime over there. And the temperature it's dry. It's kind of LA. Like LA, it's not too humid. But it's like a nice temperature. And it's like that year round. Cartagena and the coastal area is tropical all year round. So right now it'll be 90 degrees down there.
Wow. All amazing reasons to visit Colombia.
Visit Colombia!
So is it safe to say that it's year round, it's a good time to visit, or is there a good time to go over another?
Well, they really have a great season during the holidays. Like I'd say Colombia, I've been there during Christmas and New Year's, and it's just so dynamic. They also have a carnival. In Cartagena, they have a carnival. It's the third largest carnival. I think Trinidad, or I don't know which one has the biggest one, either Brazil or Trinidad. After Brazil and Trinidad is Cartagena, and they have theirs in November. And it's just you're gonna see music in the streets. There's people, they have something called I think it's called parrandas, or that might be in Puerto Rico, the name of it, but it's still the same element where musicians, they'll, instead of like, you know how we have carolers in the US, kind of a similar idea, except they're musicians and singers, and they knock on your door, and if you open, you're having a party at your house. So now there's a party going on in your house. And then we're going to go to somebody else's house and knock on the door. And if they open, we're partying at your crib.
Colombia sounds like my kind of place.
Yeah, I feel like you would have a good time there. You'll have a great time there.
Is what you're talking about similar to how, and if anyone hasn't seen Encanto yet, go watch it. We're just talking about the movie, so there might be spoilers, right? But even if it's spoiled, you can't get spoiled. Just go watch the movie.
Go watch it.
With that said, at the end of the movie, like the whole town comes. I think they were playing music towards the house, right? Was that not the case in the movie?
When they're rebuilding the house?
Yeah, and I think the whole town starts coming and it's singing.
Yeah.
Is that sort of what you're talking about? Where
similar, yeah. It would be a little bit more like the vibe would be a little bit more like how when Antonio gets his gift, how everyone's just going to that house.
Okay,
it's a little more like that festive, like excitement. I remember being a kid going to Colombia and my parents taking me to my granduncle's house where they had a courtyard very similar to casita, and all the kids would be in there playing soccer, and while the parents were doing other things and talking, and then eventually we would all be dancing. It was just so fun as a kid, man, to be able to grow up in that. So even now as an adult, to kind of go back and to experience it, it just feels the same. There's just such a magic there.
Yeah. Wow. What are some things or stereotypes that might seem harmless to whoever is assuming that, but it's offensive to Colombians? Like, how can we break that down?
Yeah. Definitely, we're not all drug dealers. I ain't gonna lie, we're not. I'm not. There's no, at least not that I know of. There's no cocaine drug lords in my family. Also, that Colombians are always trying to get their green card, or that the women are always trying to marry, or the men. I was born here, so I didn't have to deal with that stigma. But it's happened a lot in my family and friends where if someone's dating an American and they're from Colombia, it's like, oh, they want their green card, or and I think that's pretty general for a lot of immigrants, period, in the dating world. Also that, a lot of the women tend to have like fake boobs and fake, and while Colombia is really well known for its plastic surgery and its BBLs, no, it's not everyone's like that. And also I would say it's not a third world country. It's, Colombia is very technologically advanced. It's partnered with the U.S. many times, and if you go down there, you're not going to be in a little hut. While that exists, the difference between wealthy and poverty is way more intense than I would say most of America. You still have a majority of people that are, living under good conditions, decent conditions. Yeah. Whereas I know sometimes our perception in America of other countries is like, like those commercials, those feed the kid commercials.
Yes.
That's what we think, because that's what we're seeing. That's what we think like Africa is like, and like Latin America and all these other places, when it's like, no, like my friends actually have shown me countries in Africa that are thriving better than America. And I'm like, man, I kind of want to live over there, but you wouldn't know that because that's not what we see. So same thing with Colombia. There are people living in beautiful homes, and it's a different economy, different people, but they're people okay over there too.
Good. I'm glad you broke that down. It makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's say for Colombia, what are some foods that everyone should try?
Oh, man.
I'm sure there's a long list.
There's a long list. Yeah. Real quick, definitely bandeja paisa.
What is that?
Bandeja paisa is like a traditional plate, right? So it has your rice, you have your beans, you have your plantain, avocado. It comes with pork rind and steak, or skirt steak. And it has arepa, which is like a corn cake, like what they were making in Encanto, the little flat white corn cakes. I believe that's it. But it's all of that and a fried egg. All of that in one plate. That's amazing. They also have tamales, which are like tamales. But the Colombian version that kind of come in, they're like round, and they have like pork and carrots and cornmeal, like flat corn. Yeah. It's like, is it corn? It's called masa, but it's like kind of like this jumble together, like any tamale, but just with pork and chicken and steak in it too. That's really bomb. Empanadas, of course. Empanadas are the little like beef patties. Colombian.
Did empanadas originate from Colombia, or is it like a lot? Is it a dish that's in a lot of Latin American countries?
I don't know where it originated from. That's a good
Colombia
question.
does have it. Okay.
Colombia has their own version of it.
Okay.
So you have it in Puerto Rico, you have it in Argentina, you have it in different in Puerto Rico. I think they call it pastelillos, or Dominican Republic as well, or pasteles. So yeah, you have in a lot of these places you have a lot of similar things like, and if you go trace it back even further, like plantains, I believe came from like influence of Africa, or like a lot of food that we eat in Latin America was also influenced from African foods, Native American foods, and Spanish food. So a lot of our culture is a combination of those three.
Is it accessible in California or in America, or you got to go straight to Colombia, or you got to go to someone like your house, for example?
Right.
To find food? Yeah.
Well, a lot of the stuff you have to kind of import from Colombia. Like there's certain potatoes, or there's certain like food and fruit that is native to over there. But there are some restaurants, like in Los Angeles. I think there's like 4 restaurants, Colombian restaurants, which is cool. Again, I told you in the beginning, I grew up in Jackson Heights, where there was Colombian bakeries, Colombian restaurants, even movie theaters, all Colombian growing up. So I grew up not knowing that this was not normal. It's like if you grow up in Chinatown, Koreatown, Little India in New York, you grow up with this culture. Even I grew up in Queens, and fun fact, Queens is the most diverse neighborhood in the world. And that's where I grew up. So right outside of Jackson Heights, you would find like Flushing, where you would find a lot of Korean influence. And then you would find a lot of Chinese and a lot of different types of Asian influences. So and then a little further, you're in Little India, where you'd eat roti and just find a lot of Indian and Pakistan influences, music, so it wasn't just the food. You're looking at the music, the gold, the attire from all these cultures. So that's what I thought was normal. So when I came to LA, I was like, wait, what? There's only one Colombian restaurant, or even like, where's the Indian food at? One? Where's the pho? Oh, is it over here? And ramen is like over. It's so like a speck of it. So that's something that I feel LA could do better at.
Yeah, LA. She's looking at you.
Get it together.
I went to Mexico last year with my friends. We had a great time. And one of my learning lessons from that trip was a lot of tourists go to these countries, but don't actually experience the true parts of the country, and they experience more of the commercial tourism aspects. Meaning, like there's an image of what you think this country is at, because maybe you're staying near a resort or staying near a tourist area, right? And you don't ever venture out to find what's actually authentic about these places. So say if someone were to go to Colombia, like how can they experience the real Colombia versus the tourist spots?
Well, the best thing I can tell you is go with a local, or go with someone who knows. Whenever I'm in Colombia, I have family down there, and they take us around, and then you get that real experience. Because I've had that too, where you go and they have the tourist area, and you just kind of stay in that area, and you get the perception of what it is. Even like New York, for example, it's different staying in Times Square as opposed to going to stay in Brooklyn or in Queens, where you're really going to get like the New York feel, so same thing in Colombia, I would say.
What about any indigenous ceremonies? So when we were in Mexico, we did a temazcal. Does Colombia have some equivalent of that, or like a sweat lodge type of experience?
Yes, they do. There's a lot of, and I'm not too familiar with it specifically in Colombia, just because I haven't done it myself, but I do have friends that have gone down there. They've had ayahuasca experiences. They've been able to link with the indigenous tribes down there. There's the Amazon, part of the Amazon is in Colombia as well. So there's just like that's a whole nother like just chapter of exploring Colombia. You know, now we're getting away from the cities and all the stuff, the Spanish influence. Now we're in the indigenous, like Mother Earth, like rooted experience. So that's a whole nother chapter to uncover. And I'm actually excited to do that. I definitely want to do that.
Nice. We definitely got to get you back on the show after you've done it, and tell us your findings.
Yes, I'm gonna report back.
So let's go back to Encanto and talk about the creative process. What was it like? What was the workflow from drawing board to choreography? Because there's a large team, right? But within that large team, there's complex ideas being communicated, and lots of people to manage, lots of ideas, and you guys definitely killed it. But how did it happen?
Yeah, man. So I think it's very interesting. This was the first animated film that I worked on this in depth. I have worked on other films in the past as a dancer, and then to see it from dance to final product, it was really nice. But I got like a really in-depth view this time. So for us on the dancing side, at first we got word from the directors. They kind of broke down what was going on in the scene, right? As you would any film. So we understood what was going on in the film, in the scene. And then we had pictures of all the characters. Mind you, we didn't know what the story, we didn't know what the film was about, really, outside of that it had there was a family with superpowers.
You know what? Let's pull up a video and let's kind of break it down.
Yeah, let's do that. Should I pull one from mine?
Yeah.
Okay. So we would get the song, and we would get the demos from Lynn, right? And we would get the storyboard of what was going on in the scene, along with the pictures of the characters and the direction from the directors. And I'll just pause it real quick. So what you're seeing up top here, that's where we would go with it. That's what we would start. Again, we were in a dance studio. We just had information and music. Once we created the story with our bodies and the choreography for it, they would then create the bottom. And even creating this was a whole process in and of itself, because they would first start with the camera blocking of it. Then they would do a layout, which is almost like a 2D version of what you're seeing here. And then from there, they would start creating this. It's a long process, Then they would start creating this process with the animation. And then there's a whole team that does just the fabrics. And then there's a whole team that just does the hair. So it's very, I think I have, let me see if I have, here you have, we're talking about the creative process and how it went from this scene. So the thing you see on the left, the screen you see on the left, is what a rendering of the animation, what that looks like. So they would go back and start the animation process and almost do like a draft. And then they would come show me the draft, and I would pick it apart, and from picking it apart, they would go back, and we kept doing these drafts until finally we got to a place where we liked it. And then it would go on to continue being produced.
Were there any guiding principles that you guys adhere to, or visions where we got to follow this thing to make sure we stay authentic and make sure we stay true to the vision?
Well, yeah, we had a whole team outside of myself. There was a whole Colombian Cultural Trust that that they would check we would check each other's work, kind of make sure, because they would ask questions like, how would a Colombian person say thank you? And, we would say something like that's how we would show gratitude, is by kind of holding our chest, oh, thank you, and bowing our head, right? Then they would go through the whole team and everyone would say, yes, that's actually true. Things like that. The little cultural nuances. When it came to the movement of it, a lot of that was put on me, so that I did feel a lot of pressure to make sure it was right and it was authentic. But again, after getting past the initial imposter syndrome of, is this right? Trusting my instincts and understanding that, I've been Colombian for this many years. And I think I know what feels authentic.
Yeah. Wow. Absolutely. One of my favorite characters on the show is one of the uncles.
Felix.
Yeah, the one you just showed earlier, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He for some reason, every time he comes on screen, I just love everything about him. Like, I seriously love Felix. I don't know if there's any Felix fans, but I'm like Felix fan, like hardcore.
Me too. I'm such a fan of Felix, and I think what's so cool about him, and even the person who plays him is a Colombian man. His name is Mauro Castillo, and he's a singer, and he's an Afro-Colombian man. And what I think is beautiful about how he portrayed Felix and how even Felix was animated and all that was, it's so authentic to the beauty and the wonder of the Afro-Latino community, Afro-Colombian community. There's this feeling of being happy all the time and being warm and just loving. And that's very is a big characterization of the Afro-Latino community, Afro-Colombian community. So being able to portray that community authentically in a space where the Afro-Colombian community does not get visibility. I remember even growing up, a lot of people would be like, there's Black people in Colombia? What are you talking about? And I was like, no, there's a lot of people. And I remember asking my mom, being like, well, why don't we see the Black community on TV, on Colombian novela, soap operas? Or why do you only see them in Colombia? It was like, why do we only see Afro-Colombian people in Colombia? Why do we not see them on TV? And obviously at the time, I didn't understand the colorism and the prejudice and the racism that goes on around the world. So to be in a space in a time where a character like Felix is getting that visibility and it's resonating so much with people is beautiful.
Yeah, I don't know how the person who played him did it or the animators did it, but seriously, every time Felix came on the screen, I got really happy because just his mannerisms were just so on point.
Yeah. And the gentleman who plays him is like that in real life. Like he's this really highly animated. Let me see if I can find him just so you can see. Have you ever? Do you know what he looks like in real life?
No, I don't.
No, okay, I'm gonna show you. That's him. Oh my gosh, that's literally it just popped up on the screen. That's him. That is very interesting. But yes, you could even just seeing on his face, he's that guy. You know what I mean? He's Felix.
Yeah. I seriously love it. Even when his character was dancing, the way his hips move, and his mannerisms, I was like, Felix is my boy.
Yeah. And I loved, again, even being able to have a say in a conversation of how men move their hips and is still masculine. And understanding masculinity in the Latin culture, that it's unique. The men give each other hugs. The men kiss each other on the cheek. The men will dance together. The men will cross dress and for jokes and stuff like that. It's very what could be considered that they're a little feminine. They take those taboos out. Mm-hmm. And I think but it's still masculine. There was not a point in the film where I thought, oh, Felix's character is not masculine. No, I felt like even he had his family. He took care of his family. He loved his wife. He was very passionate about it. And this idea of Latin men being passionate and emotional, but still strong.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think maybe more men could, especially American men, in my experience, not gonna say all, but my experience, right? I can
right, that's it. That's your truth.
But I feel like a lot of guys here are scared of being sensual. Maybe with reason, because the culture here is different. So maybe if they were to try it or experiment with it, it would be perceived wrong.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna fault them, But I will say that you can be masculine and sensual at the same time, and it doesn't take anything away,
Right. Right. Like, and something as interesting as moving your hips. Like when I teach class, I do, I warm up with isolations and from head to toe. And then whenever I get to the hips, I just move the hips around in circles, right? And you just watch people how uncomfortable they can get.
You know, I had stories of when I used to go to 24 Hour Fitness and work out. And, you know, I'm a dancer too. So I have my warm ups, right? I got to do whether it's my neck, my chest, my spine, and so forth. And I definitely have hip warm ups, right?
Yeah.
There's been times where I'm just like in the mirror, just warm up my hips. And I can tell everyone's like,
right. They're like, what? Who's that guy? What's he doing? When it's like, what do you mean? It's such there's so much power in the hips. And if you think about it in like your chakras and stuff, that's your root chakra. You're shaking up all of that. And it's good for you. Like it's
actually really healthy because my personal style of house or dance is more footwork based, right? And I come to realize that the more free your hips are, the better your footwork is because your body is allowed to move and respond. Because stiff hips, like it just locks everything up. Your hips, our hips rather, connects our upper body to our lower body, right? And stiff hips just locks everything up. And it's not just in dance; it's in any really physical art form, right?
Yeah.
The
more balance you have, like not even just having such a horizontal or vertical movement in your hips, having this almost like figure 8, being able to loosen that up in that way gives you so much more mobility when you're balancing, when you're surfing, you're skateboarding, when you're doing anything physical. Yeah. So use your hips, guys. Use your hips. I came into your camera.
You heard it here first.
Right.
Yeah. So what's on the future for you? What's on the horizon? What's next? You know,
man,
you got big plans. I know you got big plans.
Yeah. You know, I think, like I said, this film has come into my life and in a time in which I've been exploring exploring what's next for me, and going back to being a storyteller, finding projects that are in alignment with that has been like my main focus. And so I've found a couple. You know, right now I'm working on a residency in downtown LA. Come check us out, Kai's Table. It's called the Kai Experience. It's not my restaurant, but it just happens to have the same name. That's what's up. But in there, we're creating a show where we're bringing together dance, live music, and singing, and tracks and DJs, and we're bringing all different types of performers together and producing a show from there. So that's something that's been inspiring me a lot lately. Also, I'm putting forth a workshop. It's called the MAP Workshop, and I'm actually teaching in San Francisco. So I'm teaching out here for the next couple of days, and I'm going to be going to New York, and I'm going to be going to Florida and also Colombia with this workshop. So the workshop centers around the performance aspect of dance. So while you'll have your workshops that center around foundation styles or, you know, choreography or however, my workshop is centered around performance. Like, what do you do once you have your training? What do you do? How do you produce dance, regurgitate dance, either it's choreography or freestyle? How do you put yourself in it? How do you perform it in an authentic way, right? So that's the root of the foundation of my workshop. So I'm very excited about that. And yeah, I'm open to work. I've been working with some artists and putting forth projects. So I'm looking forward to continuing to have opportunities to create and to tell stories.
Yeah, amazing. And as you should. Are you going to come down to Colombia anytime soon? And is this movie already shown in Colombia?
Yes. It's opened in Colombia the same time it did up here. And yes, I'll be going to Colombia this summer, like I said, with the workshop. And I'm excited to be able to go down there and exchange and teach and also share with the dance community down there and see how I can help. So I'm also looking forward to partnering with some charities to see how we can use this, the fame that Encanto has garnered to also help the community down there.
I saw a clip that you posted, or maybe I saw on YouTube. I don't know where I saw it, but the point is there was like little girls or little children out there that identified and even look like the characters from Encanto, right?
Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
Oh man, it makes me cry. It makes me cry because so when we first saw ourselves from our dance to the layout, we cried, right? We saw ourselves not just physically, literally in animation, but we saw our mannerisms, we saw our culture. Like, wow, we're in a Disney film. Like Latinos are in a Disney film, and then, but it was it happened in the film. It happened while we were working on it, so we didn't get like a real world view of that, right? So once the film came out, then we saw how it resonated with the children and other people and how they saw themselves. So I understand that feeling because I felt the same way. And it's so beautiful to now understand that. I had a friend of mine tell me his son, he's an African-American. His son said he saw himself in the film. And he said, it's crazy to think that our children are never going to not know what that feels like anymore. You know, like they see themselves. And from now on, children of all colors are going to see themselves represented. And what that does to a child's mind. Like we spoke earlier about not having access to what we can do and being Asian American, Latin American, right? We didn't grow up having these heroes to look up to. Even watching Disney films, we didn't see ourselves. So to be in a space now where the next generations can see themselves, I'm so excited to see what they're going to do in the future and how much they're able to dream now, you know? Makes me emotional.
Yeah, I you know, I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy for all the people that's watching this movie. And you know, I used to not realize the importance of representation until I saw more things represented, and then it changed me. And I'm like, oh, this is what it feels like.
Right.
You know, you don't really know what it feels like, right?
Because when you don't have it, right? Like we grew up thinking, looking up to other people or looking up to different types of people that don't look like us, but you don't realize that how much you need to see yourself represented. So, I love that. And I specifically with our communities have been underrepresented for years. So, I watched Raya, which came out the same year as Encanto. And I was like, wow, this is so beautiful also to see brown Asian Americans. And like, I forgot which countries were represented there, so I don't want to get it wrong. But to see different Asian American where it's not the same look, because even for that community, it's like, I'm sure being from Vietnam, and I have some friends from Vietnam, there's a wide spectrum of the way people look. There's a wide spectrum in Taiwan, which I have friends from Taiwan as well, Thailand and Laos, and you just don't see that. So it's a beautiful thing to see different types of communities represented. And I look forward to like, what's next? Like, who else are we going to learn about,
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So some closing thoughts for the dancer out there that's still discovering themselves, closing thoughts for the children, either the Latin American children, either in Colombia or anywhere that is discovering their identity for the first time. What do you have to say to them?
Oh, man. Well, to my dance community first, I'll say, it's like I said, it's a heartbreaking journey, but it's also one of the most beautiful journeys it's the most beautiful journey I've ever had. I think dance art saved my life, as to not be so dramatic, but I really do feel like it did. I feel like it has shown me who I am over and over again. So if it's something that keeps calling to your spirit, keep going. Don't let anyone deter you. Don't let anything deter you. And when we're still is when, and we're like not active, right? When you're sit still, that's when you get to understand what's really pulling at you. So sometimes we don't gain clarity because we're so cluttered with doing stuff and we're so busy, quote unquote busy. And if you feel that way, take a second and like find some stillness and find some clarity. And if in that clarity, dance still speaks to you, then that's it. That's all you need. Keep going. Keep going. And for my community, my Latin community, my Colombians, my Latinos everywhere, I'm so grateful that we're in a space where we can see ourselves, we can dream, we can tell our stories, and we can support others that don't look like us in telling their stories. And I think this is a really nice time to be alive for art, because it's a space in which we're finally being given a platform to tell our stories. So while I think it's important for us to tell our stories, I think it's important for us to tell each other's stories and for us to learn from each other. And I'll say my last thing is that I really love that Encanto and Disney used Encanto as a way to educate in a way that's entertaining, so that we can spread that positivity and continue to just spread this amongst each other. And that's why I said I'm looking forward to what other communities we can learn from in this way, and also being a part of it, and we're both in a space where we can do that. Even with this podcast, like, you're representing your community as a podcaster from Vietnam. What? Are y'all kidding me? So like someone can see that and be like, wow, he looks like me. I can do a podcast too. Because even with the podcast community, there's only certain types of people that we've seen with podcasts.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that.
Yeah, so even that, you're breaking barriers. So I think it's so cool to be alive in this time, even with everything else going on in the world that's not so cool, to be able to be a creative in this time and to have a platform to tell our stories is amazing. So please keep doing that. And lastly, if it's not there, if you have a dream for something and it's not, you don't see it, that might mean that you're meant to create it, right? So you would have told me when I was 10 years old that I would be a part of a Disney film that was centered around Colombia. I would have laughed in your face, but here I am, and so don't ever think your dreams are like crazy, because they're not.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I have one more request I'd like to make.
Yes.
So speaking of different communities, maybe if you could offer something, a short message in Spanish for anyone who speaks Spanish but does not know English yet,
Yeah.
So they would have access to your story. So yeah.
Yes. Bueno, mi gente, primeramente quiero decirles que me siento muy agradecida y feliz, y es un honor para mí ser parte de una comunidad de artistas que trabajó en Encanto. Y como colombiana me siento muy orgullosa de poder representar mi familia, mi cultura, mi gente en esta forma. También es como es de una forma de decir que uno puede soñar. O sea, uno puede darse uno ese mismo permiso para soñar y para que todos sus sueños se hagan realidad, pues, porque si hay algo que uno tiene un sueño y no lo ve, igual eso a lo mejor significa que eres tú la persona indicada para que haga ese sueño realidad. Entonces no pare de soñar y no pare de seguir adelante, que nosotros los latinos somos berracos y somos fuertes y somos gente que muy salida adelante. Y que sigan ánimo, sigan con sus proyectos, sigan con todo lo que quieren hacer, igual que lo van a hacer. Yeah, amazing. That was fun. I felt very inspired. My Spanish usually is not as fluid like that, so I was very.
Thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing that. And finally, how can anyone support you?
Oh man, I think. Well, definitely social media. Please find me on there. Everything is at Kai_Martinez __. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. And yeah, anything you see that you like, please share it. You know what I mean? in the future, I am looking forward to starting a nonprofit in that way. So be on the lookout for that. And I think thank you for anyone who has been supporting me up until this point. I am so grateful. I love when my friends are tagging me on videos of Encanto and stuff like that. So to feel that support from my community and my people, my friends, is really dope. So thank you guys. And even if you don't know me, thank you.
With that said, thank you for coming on the show. It's been amazing getting to know your story. I got a lot of insights, and I can't wait for people to check us out. I'm so happy for you and your journey. I am even happier for your family because they see your passion and see it to blow up to where it's at. Like as a family member. I imagine when my brother or sister or my family member have the same success, I'm so happy for them, right? So I'm so happy for you and your family, and hope to have you back on the show soon.
Absolutely. I got to come back after I do ayahuasca in Colombia.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Vin. You've been amazing. And thank you so much. Much success, much luck to you on this endeavor. I'm so excited to see episode 3 of season 10.
Yes. There we go.
Hello.
Thank you.